Ahead of the much-anticipated meeting with Russian President Vladimir Putin, US President Joe Biden has promised to lay down the red lines to his Russian counterpart. This after the US and NATO allies vowed to face up to the challenges from both Russia and China.
We should decide where it's in our mutual interest, in the interest of the world, to cooperate and see if we can do that. And the areas where we don't agree, make it clear what the red lines are. I have met with him. He's bright, he's tough, and I have found that he is as they say when he used to play ball, a worthy adversary.
Speaking after a NATO summit, Biden said that China and Russia were trying to split the transatlantic alliance and reiterated that while he wasn't looking for conflict with Russia, the US would respond if Russia continued its violent activities.
I shared with our allies that I'll convey to President Putin, that I'm not looking for conflict with Russia, but that we will respond if Russia continues its harmful activities. And we will not fail to defend the transatlantic alliance or stand up for democratic values.
Biden also said the potential of death of opposition leader Alexei Navalny, currently jailed in Russia, would be a tragedy and would hurt Russian relations with the rest of the world.
Navalny's death would be another indication that Russia has little or no intention of abiding by basic, fundamental human rights. It would be a tragedy. It would do nothing but hurt his relationships with the rest of the world, in my view, and with me.
Other issues expected to be brought up by Biden is cyber attacks and Russian aggression at the Ukrainian border. Joining us on this broadcast is WION correspondent Nick Harper, who joins us for more on this. Nick Harper joins us from Washington. Nick, welcome to WION. Now, in March, like we mentioned, Joe Biden appeared to set the tone for his relations with Vladimir Putin and Russia by agreeing that Vladimir Putin is a killer. But a day before the meeting, he appears to change his tone. Now he calls Putin a bright and tough guy and a worthy adversary. Why the change of tone by Biden?
Yeah, a very strange change in tone. He was asked to repeat that assertion that he made a few months ago during a press conference after the NATO meeting, asked whether he would again classify Putin as a killer. He did not use that word this time round, instead using really quite warm words for his adversary, but making it clear that he sees him more as a foe than a friend, saying that potentially there were areas that the two countries could cooperate on things like COVID-19, but he does feel that there are a number of issues that are still standing in the way of a warm relationship. I think the president here is trying to lay down that marker before he goes into that summit in Geneva on Wednesday to show that he is ready to stand up to the Russian president, but he's also willing to try and extend perhaps not quite an olive branch, but at least a friendly hand to find some areas of cooperation, not wanting conflict, as he made quite clear, and seeing if there is some way forward to improve relations with Russia, which have been at historic low levels over the last few years, really since 2014, when Russia annexed Crimea from Ukraine. It has been a very rocky relationship, and I think the president is trying to signal that he's ready to try and move things forward if he possibly can. But as we know, there are plenty of very thorny issues standing in the way of these two leaders.
Absolutely spot on there. Now, it appears that Biden also warming up, like you mentioned, to dialogue with Vladimir Putin, but many issues remain, not just the Ukrainian issue, but the cyber attacks on the US, the election meddling. So certainly Biden and Putin have a lot to discuss. But we saw the G7 also focusing on both Russia and China. We saw NATO also discussing both Russia and China. How big an issue now is China? Is China going to dominate the talks between NATO allies, G7 members? Is China also going to feature in the talks between Biden and Putin?
Well, undoubtedly there will be some reference to China between the meeting between Russia and the United States, just because the US feels that Russia is essentially cozying up to China, and the US doesn't want to see that happen. I think we definitely saw that change in tone at the G7, and in particular at NATO. The last time that they put out a communique 2 years ago when they met face to face, there was only one mention of China. This time round, China was mentioned 10 times. Joe Biden is very concerned about China. It is his top foreign policy issue, and he's been trying to push the Western nations that are involved in NATO to take China more seriously. In the past, just because of the geographical location of Russia being on Europe's doorstep, Russia has been the bigger, more perceived threat for NATO and the allies throughout Europe. Joe Biden is certainly trying to change that. He is still very wary of Russia, and he's telling NATO that they should be as well, but also trying to signal to them that China should be on their horizon. And I think we saw him persuasively persuade the G7 countries and the NATO leaders that they need to be paying attention to China. There was some very strong language coming out at the end of that communique, at the end of today's meeting, making it clear that they feel China is a threat in a large number of areas, worried about its build-up of military, worried about its build-up of nuclear weapons, and worried about the fact that it is not doing it transparently. All of those things certainly concerning the NATO countries in a way that we've never really seen before at the behest of Joe Biden.
Nick, stay with us. We've got more updates coming in as far as Joe Biden's Europe visit is